So, hello students, good afternoon. Welcome to Khan Global Studies. And in this particular session, we're going to discuss the answers to those questions which have been asked from International Relations segment in GS2 of 2024. These questions are very important, and most importantly, most of these questions have come from our segment which we've covered in international relations. I will also be telling you, from where, these questions have come and how to, frame answers to these questions. In this particular segment, every question I've dealt with is first, I will be, discussing the approach to this question, that what things you need to have in your mind while you're approaching for this question. Second, what should be there in the introduction part, what should be there in the body part, what should be there in the conclusion part. This is going to be a standard format which is fixed for all the questions which are asked from international relations segment in GS2. Now, was there any uh, you know changes from the past in this year's GS paper? First of all, no, there was no changes. No changes means there were 10 questions of 10 marks, 10 questions of 15 marks in GS2 paper. This has been the trend largely from, I would say, 2017-18 onwards. There were 4 questions from IR. 4 questions. Basically, every year UPSC asks 4 questions from IR. This year also 4 questions were there from IR. Out of these four, 2 questions were 10 marker questions and 2 questions were 15 marker questions. So 2 into 10, 20, 2 into 15, 30, which makes it 50. So this is what was same in this year's GS2 paper, specifically with respect to IR and the previous year papers. No change in pattern, no change in the number of questions, no change in the marks allotted. 50 marks, 4 questions, 2 questions of 10 marks, 2 questions of 15 marks. However, this does not mean that this will remain same next year also, because many of you who are watching are of this viewpoint that next year you will be giving this exam next year or probably next to next year. So as UPSC aspirants, I want to tell you one thing very clear straight, that UPSC is unpredictable and you have to be prepared for anything and everything. There can be a possibility where there will be reduced number of questions from this segment. So don't get disheartened. And if number of questions will reduce from this segment, number of questions from some other segment in GS2 like polity, governance or social justice may increase. So you have to be equally better prepared for those segments as well if you want to get selected. There can be a possibility that there are more number of questions from IR next year or next to next year. So the number of questions from other segments may reduce. So this is what you need to understand and know. And you have to be prepared for anything and everything. This is the best strategy for UPSC. There's no better strategy than this. And your preparation needs to be balanced. That is what you need to understand and know. So let us begin this particular segment, and we will be discussing these 4 questions which were asked in this IR segment of GS2. 2 questions 10 marks, 2 questions 15 marks. So we will be picking up the 10 marker questions earlier, and then after that we will be picking up the 15 marker questions. There is a difference between 10 marker and 15 marker questions. So chalo, let us look at the difference. Difference: 10 marker question में you have to write the answer in 150 words and you get 2 pages. for writing the answer. In a 15 marker question, you have to write it in 250 words and you get 2.5 to 3 pages for this. This is what needs to be understood, the difference between these two questions or these two types of questions, 10 marker and 15 marker. And accordingly, you need to frame your answers, you need to plan your answers. And this difference, if I tell you that 10 marker questions are more difficult to write, they're more difficult to write because you have to give a lot of information in 2 pages, 150 words. So let's get started and let's see these questions. This is KGS English channel. I'm sorry, guys, and we have to discuss it in English uh, as per the norms of this channel. Okay. Now, question number one: the West is fostering India as an alternative to reduce dependence on in China's supply chain as a strategic ally to counter China's political and economic dominance. Explain this statement with example. So first of all, to approach any answer, you need to have understood the question. What is the question demanding over here? So in a nutshell, if I have to, explain you the question, see, China over the years have become the world's factory. 1976, China did reforms. Like we did in 1991, LPG reforms, China did these kind of reforms in 1976. And China focused on developing the secondary sector just after reforms. It became the world's factory in the times to come. World's factory means the products, the goods were being manufactured in China for the entire world. China used to manufacture those goods and used to supply those goods. Even developed countries, the Western countries, outsource their manufacturing to China. Now, this is a, I would say, universal phenomena. As you develop, you move more towards service sector, that is the tertiary sector. Secondary sector, you know, there is a lot of utilization of natural resources. There is a lot of utilization of, I would say, or there's a lot of pollution of the environment and all which happens. So developed countries don't want that. So they outsource it. So they outsourced it to China. And China was making goods for developed countries also and sending them there. Like Apple iPhones or Apple MacBooks or for that matter, any other, sophisticated items which used to earlier get manufactured in the West, but now they were getting manufactured in China. And the West became dependent upon China because China was making those goods and supplying them to the West. In fact, China was supplying it to the entire world. So, you know, uh, West realized one thing later on, that China is taking undue advantage of this dependency on China. And hence, the West started looking towards alternatives. And when the West started looking towards alternatives, it found India in the neighboring region of China. China and India, similar situation, huge population, cheap labor. But the difference between India and China, China is not a democracy, India is. So, getting things done over here in India can meet certain roadblocks due to protests and all. This thing doesn't happen in China. Another difference was China focused on the secondary sector in 1976 when it did the reforms. India focused on tertiary sector. So India's secondary sector was largely, I would say, neglected. And There was less expertise as compared to China in the secondary sector. But yes, there was secondary sector which was growing. So the West started, pursuing India. You can see Apple's, manufacturing unit has come to India. Samsung's manufacturing unit has come to India. They've shifted base from China to India. So this clearly highlights that how the West is, looking for options other than China, because China is, you know, not playing, I would say, or being too much unfair in its dealings with the West as per the West. So we need to explain this statement with examples. Now I am again reading the question so that you can get it in a much better way. West is fostering India as an alternative to reduce dependence. To reduce dependence is the term on China's supply chain and as a strategic ally to counter China's political and economic dominance. And due to this, China becoming the factor of the world, China started dominating politically and economically. But now West is not liking it. West wants to control or contain China by partnering with other countries like India. We have to explain the statement with examples. We have to give examples. Like I gave you that example of Apple, Samsung, and all. You have to give other examples also in this domain. What the West is doing to foster its, ties with India with the objective of countering China. So approach for this question, know the global scenarios with respect to supply chains. As I told you, global scenarios. China has become the world's factory. Presently, China is having monopoly in manufacturing certain components like semiconductor chips and all. Know the dependence of the West on China. So, there is a lot of trade between China and the West. Like, for example, if I give you some numbers, you can imagine from those numbers what it is. Uh, Trade between India and China, it is somewhere around 125, 130 billion dollars in a year. Trade between India and USA is also somewhere around 130 to 135 billion dollars in a year. But the trade between USA and China is more than 600 billion dollars. This is how the West is dependent upon China. And in this 600 billion dollars, China is exporting more as compared to importing from US. Why? Because USA has outsourced manufacturing to China. So the West has become dependent upon China. And this situation, this particular situation, that West has become dependent upon China, these are the two rivals now, America and China, and they are interdependent upon each other. This is basically the new era. Ignore the balloons. This is some AI generated feature. But yes, you know, uh, this is a new, I would say, era. And it is very different from the Soviet era. Soviet era, the two rivals were USA and USSR, and they were not dependent upon each other. They were mutually exclusive. Trade was, almost zero between them. But here the situation is different. There is more interdependence, intertwining, and we need to look at the world from this lens, that is the lens of interdependence. Know the manufacturing capabilities of India and China. So the West is obviously looking towards alternatives, but will India be able to fulfill those requirements of the West? Does India have so much skillful manpower? Does India have all the resources of manufacturing? Does India have a conducive environment for business? All these are the factors which needs to be considered as well. Then only, those companies will prosper here in India and they will do business here in India. Else they will not be able to do so. Then, these companies, the Western countries will have to be dependent upon China. They'll be having no options. Know about the threats the West is facing from China. So all these things we should know, and then we should be able to frame a better answer to this question. Answer, we need to compare the situation. Introduction, in which you can begin your answer in a very impactful manner. You can give a comparative analysis of the present day scenario where the West is dependent upon China These are the two rivals, USA obviously representing the West, and China, the two superhouses or the superpower in the world right now. How they are interdependent and how this scenario, the current scenario, is different from the scenario which was there in the Cold War era. So compare the situation in the present day multipolar world with the bipolar world. Bipolar world was that world during the Cold War era. Bipolar means two poles, USA and USSR. In this multipolar world, there are multiple poles, but the two most prominent poles, USA and China. The difference is that in today's era, the two biggest powerhouses are dependent on each other, especially for trade. For example, trade between USA and China is more than $600 billion. This was not the case in the Cold War era between USSR and USA. But competition was there. So we cannot ignore the competition. Competition was there then also, competition is there now also. So competition was present then also and now also. So to manage this competition in a multipolar world and to maintain its hegemony, USA is partnering with countries like India and to contain China. So to win that competition, then also USA wanted to win. Now also obviously USA is wanting to win. China is also wanting to win. USA will try its best. China will try its best. So USA, in order to have an edge, reduce its dependence upon China, is partnering with countries like India. Now, in the body, how the West is doing it, how the West is partnering with India, or in this context, the context of the question is in India only. So, how the West is doing it, it means partnering with India. Some examples in this context, because you have to explain with examples. So, we are explaining with examples. It all started with pivot to Asia policy of Barack Obama administration. Barack Obama administration launched this pivot to Asia policy when Barack Obama was the president. It was somewhere around 2000, I would say early 2010s. Pivot to Asia, where America wanted to promote all those countries in Asia apart from China to contain China's rise. Second, formation of Quad. Quad comprises of four countries: India, Japan, Australia, and USA. So all these four countries are there in the Indo-Pacific region, and China is becoming too much active in the Indo-Pacific region. South China Sea issue is obviously there. Then formation of Indo-Pacific Economic Framework into 2021, IPEF. This is a unique framework. This is a trade facilitation agreement in which trade is facilitated. There are 14 countries, and again here the aim is to contain China, to increase trade among these 14 countries and reduce their dependence on China. So this is what IPEF is aimed at. Another example in this context, what the West is doing, finding alternatives and including India. India is part of IPEF. So it is like this. During COVID, many companies like Apple and Samsung have opened their manufacturing facilities in India. So this is another example in this context. India is aspiring to become a hub of semiconductor chip manufacturing. But this domain is monopolized by China as of now, and we want to reduce that monopoly over China. We means India also, obviously, the West also wants to reduce that monopoly of China. And for this, USA, countries like Japan, countries like Singapore, they're all partnering with India. They want to open a manufacturing hub over here in India for semiconductor chips. And most importantly, India is wanting to do that because India is also dependent upon China. This is the point of convergence for India and the West. So they are doing it. Even countries like Taiwan, or I would say regions like Taiwan, they are opening up or setting up this semiconductor manufacturing facility in India. So this is also one such domain. Then India's naval capabilities have also enhanced in the past by signing multiple agreements like LEMOA, that is logistic exchange memorandum of articles with USA and acquisition and cross servicing agreement with Japan. So naval capabilities will enhance the strategic presence of India and these countries in the Indo-Pacific region where China is doing a lot of activities, South China Sea, and it is impacting the trade routes. So it is basically this way. And these are, the certain examples, and you can see how diverse these examples are. And all of these examples, you will find a common link among them, that is participation by West and India to contain China. And that is what the question was demanding. And you had to explain this by examples. These are the examples. And you need to understand the context of the question, and bang on, you have to be there. Right? You don't have to beat around the bush. If you keep on beating around the bush and you are not coming to the point directly, there will be no marks or less marks. And you don't have the scope of beating around the bush because 150 words mein likhna hai. You have to write in 150 words only, yaar. 2 pages. So you need to be very clear. You need to be very crisp. That is what the demand of this paper is. So this is what it is. Now coming to the conclusion. Okay, the West is partnering with India doing it. But we should also make sure one thing, that we are not used and thrown away. Use and throw wala hisab nahi hona chahiye. It should not be there by the West. We should be very much careful and proactive on this front as well. Because see, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji keh gaye, you cannot choose, you can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbors. China हमारा neighboring country है. इनमें से कोई भी Western countries is not our neighboring countries. It is not. And they will never be our neighboring countries. China will always remain our neighboring country. And our brand of diplomacy is like Vasudev Kutumbakam. सबका साथ सबका विश्वास. तो सबका में चाइना भी आता है. तो we should not take certain measures in such a way that it can create certain differences with China, so that our relations with China come to a certain point where our differences are so much that it will lead to lifelong conflicts between India and China. It should not be this way. So we need to adopt a balanced approach, and that is what you need to mention in the conclusion. ठीक है, you need to become Atmanirbhar, you need to reduce dependencies, you need to generate employment in your country. For that, you need to partner with the West. You are doing it. And in all of that, you are getting that, benefit of containing China. But इतना भी ज़्यादा नहीं हो जाए कि you are used and thrown by the West. You need to be cautious. और आप चाइना से बहुत ज़्यादा रिलेशंस खराब ना कर लें, ऐसे ना कर लें कि वो वापस से रिपेयर कभी नहीं हो सकते. क्योंकि वो हमेशा हमारे नेबरहुड में रहेगा और हम उनके नेबरहुड में रहेंगे. और पीसफुल नेबरहुड हर एक देश का सपना होता है, चाहे वो बड़ा से बड़ा ताकतवर से ताकतवर देश हो, चाहे वो कमजोर से कमजोर देश हो. So this needs to be understood in this context. I hope I am very clear to you all for this first question. अब आते हैं दूसरे क्वेश्चन पे, सेकंड क्वेश्चन. Critically analyze India's evolving diplomatic, economic and strategic relations with Central Asian republics. तो सबसे पहले तो we need to understand critically analyze. हमें criticize करना है, हमें critically analyze करना है. What do we have to critically analyze? We have to critically analyze the evolving diplomatic, economic and strategic relations with Central Asian republics. Yes, Central Asian republics, we need to understand and know what are the Central Asian republics. Which countries are part of the Central Asian republics? Highlighting their increasing significance in regional and global geopolitics. So we should know that as well कि उनका क्या importance है region में and at the global level. Both of these we should understand. So critically analyze if we have to do so, we have to highlight the shortcoming of India's diplomatic engagement with CAR, economic engagement with CAR, and strategic engagement with CAR. And we also have to highlight what is the growing importance of the CAR and where we are lacking on these three fronts and what can be done. As simple as that. Know about Central Asian region. जो approach होगी इस question के लिए, first we need to know about the Central Asian republics and India's historical ties with them. Second is know about the significance of CAR for India and the world. Like this Central Asian Republic or Central Asian region is very much energy rich. You talk about any mineral, you will find it over there. Coal, natural gas, oil, minerals like iron ore, steel to it is processed, mica, bauxite, uranium, you name anything, you find it over there. These are such, I would say, blessed regions of the world. So that is their importance. Russia is fighting this war. It has sustained itself economically. It is exporting energy also to the world. These republics, the Central Asian republics, are supplying energy to Russia. They have been an all-time ally of Russia. China is also increasing its influence over this Central Asian region or Central Asian republics through its Belt and Road Initiative. Why should India be behind? But yes, there are certain areas in diplomatic, economic, and strategic domains where India is lacking, and we have to critically analyze, obviously, that. Know about the factors which are leading to their increasing significance in regional and global geopolitics. So why their increasing significance or why their significance is increasing in global geopolitics. We need to know that as well. Obviously, their mineral rich, I would say, resources are the reasons behind that. And know about the challenges India is facing in deepening ties with this region. So let us understand the answer. Intro. First of all, you need to explain Central Asian region or Central Asian Republic comprises of which countries. So these are the five stans. Kazakhstan starts with K. Another stan starts with K is Kyrgyzstan. This is a way of memorizing it. Then we have another two stans starting from T. Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. And one stan starting from U, that is Uzbekistan. So these are the five countries. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. KKUTT. This is Central Asian region or Central Asian republics. Now, we now know that these are mineral rich, energy rich regions, but they are landlocked. Actually, they are double landlocked. Double landlocked means they are landlocked, they are not having access to any shoreline, and their neighboring countries are also landlocked. Like for example, Afghanistan. Afghanistan shares boundary with 3 or 4 of these stans. That is also landlocked. That is why I'm saying that doubly landlocked, double landlocked countries these are. So that is one such, I would say, curse on these mineral rich regions. But yes, overland connectivity is what can mobilize their resources. Their resources have to be mobilized before this oil boom gets over. That is what needs to be understood. Now, India has several millennia old historical, cultural, and civilizational links with Central Asia. So, you can mention about India's historical linkages with Central Asia in the introduction. This will give a historical context in the introduction, and that is a good type of introduction. So, first of all, you've introduced what CR is. Then you can talk about the ancient trade of goods, ideas, and thoughts which took place from India and China to Central Asia and beyond over the Silk Road from 3rd century BC to 15th century AD. Buddhism traveled to Afghanistan, Central Asia, and Western China from India through the Silk Road. Many, invaders like Alexander of Macedonia, Kushans, Babur, Mughals, and Sufism are evidence of vigorous links between India and the region over the ages. So these Turks and all, they came to India, they invaded India. So they came from the Central Asian region. We can call it as the extended neighborhood also of India because it is above Afghanistan. Afghanistan can be considered as part of our neighborhood. India and CARs enjoyed vibrant economic and cultural ties when the latter were a part of Soviet Union. So all these stans were part of Soviet Union. So, India and these stans, they enjoyed, India overall enjoyed a good relations with USSR or Soviet Union at that time. So these stans were part of it. And you know what? These stans were not willing that USSR gets disintegrated, primarily because of their landlocked nature. Because as part of USSR, they were having access to all weather ports and all. So they were doing good business, but now they were independent countries and they had to establish relations with those countries which were having access to ports. And that is why probably their relations with Russia is good. So this is there. Now in the body part, what you have to write, India has not been able to take full advantage of its close linkage with this region. We have historical ties, we've seen that. Cultural ties, we've seen that. But India is not able to take advantage of this historical and cultural ties with the Central Asian republics or Central Asian region. Why? Because it does not share a land boundary with these countries. So this connectivity is the issue. It should not have been there. But we have countries like Pakistan which are acting like a barrier for us to connect to the Central Asian region. So that is why we are not able to connect. To overcome this obstacle, several initiatives which have been in the pipeline for many years have now been fast tracked and they have been materialized. So we are trying to bypass Pakistan. How? There are two projects into picture over here. One is International North-South Trade Corridor and second is the Chabahar Port. Now talking about International North-South Trade Corridor. So it is basically a multimodal transport corridor which starts from India over here. Through the oceans we reach Iran. We are bypassing Pakistan. This is Pakistan. We bypass it. We reach Iran, Bandar Abbas port. From Iran over the land route, we reach the stans. This is basically the Central Asian region. This is the Caspian Sea over here. So this is how we can reach, Central Asian region, and this international North-South trade corridor is operational now. A lot of oil to India is coming from this international North-South trade corridor. Second is, which has been successful also, is Chabahar Port Terminal. India has constructed one terminal, that is the Shahid Behesti terminal in the Chabahar port. And you know, it is not only the port which has been constructed, it is basically the port and the connectivity from the port. So it is connecting us to Afghanistan, and from here to beyond it can connect. From Iran also it can take to Central Asia. It can be connected with the INSTC, which is basically passing through here. INSTC is going this way. This Bandar Abbas port is here in Iran. So it can get connected to this INSTC as well. So these are the two, I would say, connectivity projects which India has, envisaged to connect with Central Asian region. But yes, these have been materialized now. So this is a golden opportunity for us to increase our engagements with the Central Asian region. And in this Modi 3.0, we are also looking to this new, I would say, thing that the this particular government is touching the untouched lands. And obviously, these are the untouched lands for India relatively, which can be touched, which can be, be beneficial for India. But challenges in India CAR, diplomatic, economic, and strategic relations. Actually, we have to highlight these. What are the challenges? Diplomatic, economic, and strategic challenges. First is Tapi gas pipeline. Tapi stands for Turkmenistan, which is part of the stans, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Now, this has to carry natural gas from Turkmenistan to India, and in the interim, Afghanistan can take access, divert gas, Pakistan can have access to that gas, and finally, India will be having access to that gas. This project has been stalled, kind of. It has not been, scrapped, but yes, there is no progress because there is a lot of, instability in, um, I would say, Afghanistan, Taliban takeover and all. Pakistan, economic struggles are there, so we cannot expect Pakistan to be part of it. Actually, around 47.5% of the cost has to be borne by India. Similar cost has to be borne by Pakistan, that is 47.5, and 5% cost has to be borne by the Afghanistan. But it is a big question whether Afghanistan and Pakistan will bear these costs or not. So that is stalled. Then terrorism, religious extremism and radicalization, particularly of the youth in these countries, like rise of Taliban, advent of Daesh, and presence of Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, Hizb ut Tahrir, etc. They pose a huge threat to peace and security in this Central Asian region. So this is basically another reason why we are not able to connect. Then region offers significant trade, investment and economic opportunities to Indian business, but it has not been realized because the main issue is connectivity issue. That is the main issue. And obviously the government's involvement has also been very less. Now, since we have to talk about diplomatic, I would say, shortcomings as well. Indian Prime Minister visited this region in 2015. After that, no visit. And before 2015, the last Indian Prime Minister visited this region when this was part of Soviet Union was Indira Gandhi. So there was this huge gap. So if diplomatic engagements will not be there, frequent diplomatic engagements will not be there, obviously problem will be there. How can we expect that, we can take advantage of the huge resources of this region? We need to connect, keep connecting with this region. So interaction between leaders of India and those of Central Asian republics since their independence has been inadequate. PM Modi visited in 2015 before Indira Gandhi visited. So this is obviously not the way. And these are what? Diplomatic, economic and strategic shortcomings. And that is why these relations have been impacted. Conclusion. So in the current times, these current Central Asian republics constitute the extended neighborhood of India, as I mentioned. So we need to look towards this region. Like we have the neighborhood first policy, we can go for launching the extended neighborhood policy, which will help us connect with this particular region specifically. This particular region which is resource rich, and India needs the resources. If India has to be developed by 2047, India has to have access of those resources. Diplomatic deficiency can be overcome by frequent meetings. There's no big deal in this. In a bilateral or a multilateral setup like SCO. So these countries are part. Four of these stans are part of SCO also. Turkmenistan is not part of it. But yes, you know, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we can be partners in SCO, or we can increase our engagements over there. India EEU FTA. EEU stands for Eurasian Economic Union. We are discussing this free trade agreement. In this Eurasian Economic Union, countries like Kazakhstan and all are there. But this negotiation has not been completed, so it has not been adopted. This needs to be adopted. This is also, a shortcoming, an economic shortcoming, we can say. India and Central Asian countries are secular, pluralistic, diverse, and peaceful societies. So these are convergence points. All these are similarities between us and them, but still we are not, increasing our engagement. We are natural allies and partners. So that is somewhere something is lacking. And we as Indians can see things on our part that would be much better. Obviously, these countries would also be looking at markets, and India is a huge market, and everyone in the world knows that right now. So, this is the need of the hour, not only in the region but in the world as of now. So, this question is also complete. Now, coming to the third question, that is, terrorism has become a significant threat to global peace and security. Evaluate the effectiveness of United Nations Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee (CTC) and its associated bodies in addressing and mitigating this threat at the international level. Now, this question is of 15 marks to 50 words. So we need to first of all know what this counter-terrorism committee is of the United Nations Security Council, and we need to understand that what kind of resolutions it has adopted. We should memorize at least 3-4 resolutions it has adopted, and how effective have they been, because you have to assess the effectivity of this. So terrorism has become a significant threat to global peace and security. Evaluate the effectiveness of the United Nations Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee and its associated bodies in addressing and mitigating this threat at the international level. The approach, सबसे पहले तो you should know about Counter-Terrorism Committee, वो क्या है? Know about the measures taken by CTC with respect to terrorism. Terrorism के लिए CTC ने क्या-क्या कदम उठाए? What measures have been taken? Know about the evolving threats and CTC's preparedness and response. टेररिज्म में इवॉल्विंग थ्रेट्स क्या है, जैसे कि टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस दे आर यूजिंग क्रिप्टो करेंसीज अलॉट आजकल, तो वो चीज एक थ्रेट है, एक नया थ्रेट है. या फिर टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आर फॉर्मिंग कोलैबोरेशंस विद ऑर्गेनाइज्ड क्रिमिनल ग्रुप्स, वो एक नया थ्रेट है. टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ड्रोन यूज कर रहे, वो एक नया थ्रेट है. ड्रोन्स फॉर ट्रांसपोर्टिंग आर्म्स, ड्रग्स फ्रॉम हियर टू देयर. These kind of threats also, these are evolving threats, they also need to be taken into account. Actually 2022 mein India was the chairperson of CTC and India hosted this CTC summit in India, and there, this evolving threats, these two evolving threats were discussed. Number one, use of cryptocurrencies by the terrorist organizations for fund transfers and doing the transactions. Second was the use of drones by these terrorist organizations. तो ऐसा बेसिकली है. अब आंसर इस क्वेश्चन का क्या अप्रोच रखना है ये तो हमें पता लग गया, ठीक है. बट इंट्रोडक्शन में हम क्या लिखेंगे? सीटीसी कब फॉर्म हुआ? ये फॉर्म हुआ 2001 में, जब 11 सितंबर 9/11 अटैक्स इन 2001 हुए थे यूएसए में. तो एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दैट और इन द आफ्टरमैथ ऑफ दैट दिस वाज फॉर्म्ड. The United Nations Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 1373 जब ये अटैक्स हुए. एंड 1373 क्या है? रेजोल्यूशन 1373 क्या है? इट ऑब्लाइजेस ऑल स्टेट्स टू क्रिमिनलाइज असिस्टेंस फॉर टेररिस्ट एक्टिविटीज, deny financial support and safe haven to terrorists, and share information about groups planning terrorist attacks. The 15-member counter-terrorism committee was established at the same time to monitor the implementation of the resolution. तो ये जो 9/11 अटैक्स हुए उसके बाद एक रेजोल्यूशन अडॉप्ट हुआ. इस रेजोल्यूशन का नाम था रेजोल्यूशन नंबर 1373 फॉर इंटरनेशनल टेररिज्म. इस रेजोल्यूशन में लिखा था कि सारे स्टेट्स, सारे मेंबर्स जो हैं वो टेररिस्ट या टेरर फाइनेंसिंग, अपने यहाँ पर कोई भी टेरर ग्रुप्स है उनको क्रैकडाउन करेंगे, लॉज बनाएंगे, ये सब चीजें लिखी हुई थी. सबके ऊपर ऑब्लिगेशन है, सबको ये करना है. इट वाज लाइक दिस. ये तो रेजोल्यूशन था, रेजोल्यूशन नंबर 1373 व्हिच वाज अडॉप्टेड इन द आफ्टरमैथ ऑफ 9/11. इस रेजोल्यूशन को ठीक से इंप्लीमेंट कराने के लिए 15-member counter-terrorism committee was established at the same time to monitor implementation of the resolution. Which resolution? This resolution. This resolution 1373 for global terrorism. तो CTC का फॉर्मेशन, उसका पर्पस हमें पता लग गया. दिस हैज टू बी रिटन इन द इंट्रोडक्शन. अब बॉडी में क्या है करेंगे? सबसे पहले तो एसोसिएटेड बॉडीज ऑफ सीटीसी ये डालो. काउंटर टेररिज्म कमिटी एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टोरेट, CTED. This was formed to provide CTC with an expert advice on all areas covered by resolution 1373. तो CTED क्या दे रहा है? CTED is giving expert advice. It was established ऑल्सो विद द एम ऑफ फैसिलिटेटिंग टेक्निकल असिस्टेंस टू कंट्रीज, कंट्रीज को टेक्निकल असिस्टेंस भी देनी है, किस तरीके से ये लोग फ्रॉड्स करते हैं, फाइनेंशियल फ्रॉड्स करते हैं, फाइनेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस करते हैं, आप किस तरीके से इनको इंटरसेप्ट कर सकते हो, कैसे आप अपनी टेक्नोलॉजिकल कैपेबिलिटीज बढ़ा सकते हो टू काउंटर टेररिज्म, ये सारी चीजें सीटीईडी सिखाएगा. दिस इज एन एसोसिएटेड बॉडी. अगेन वी हैव टू एनालाइज और असेस द इफेक्टिविटी ऑफ दीज एसोसिएटेड बॉडीज. क्या ये कर पाया है? एक्चुअली में अफ्रीका में नहीं कर पाया, वेस्ट एशिया में नहीं कर पाया. दैट इज वाई वी हैव ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस और टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस coming up like Boko Haram in Africa या फिर ISIS in the Levant region of West Asia. तो बिग क्वेश्चन. अच्छा, रेजोल्यूशन 1373 9/11 अटैक्स के बाद, इससे पहले भी टेररिज्म को काउंटर करने के लिए एक रेजोल्यूशन टेबल हुआ था यूनाइटेड नेशन में 9/11 अटैक से पहले. दैट वाज अल-कायदा एंड तालिबान सैंक्शंस कमिटी, इसको बोलते हैं रेजोल्यूशन 1267. ऑब्वियसली 1373 से पहले हुआ है तो नंबर कम ही होगा ना, 1267. In 1999 to impose sanctions on related individuals and entities. अब 1999 में तालिबान was ruling over अफगानिस्तान. 1996 से 2001 तक तालिबान का रूल था वहां पे. तो एंड दैट वाज अ मिलिटेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, तो इसलिए सैंक्शंस लगाने के लिए बोल रहा था. यूनाइटेड नेशंस काउंटर टेररिज्म सेंटर was also established in 2011 with within the counter terrorism implementation task force office in the Department of Political Affairs. It provides capacity building support for member states in implementing the United Nations Global Counter Terrorism Strategy. तो कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग वगैरह करवाता है, बट क्या करवा पाया है ये? अगेन if we see African countries, they are not capable enough of fighting terrorism. If we see West Asian countries, they are not capable enough of fighting terrorism. Terrorism is getting spread in countries like, Afghanistan, Pakistan and all. So that is a big question. Challenges in tackling terrorism. क्या challenges है? सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज तो ये है कि हमारे पास टेररिज्म की कोई ऐसी डेफिनेशन नहीं है जिसको सब एक्सेप्ट करते हो. डेफिनेशंस हैं, बट जिनको सब एक्सेप्ट करते हो वो नहीं. वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड द डिफरेंस ओवर हियर. There are definitions of terrorism. India has a definition of terrorism, which India has used it in laws like UAPA or I would say the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita now. But at the global level, we don't have a definition on which we have universal consensus. So, ये है lack of proper enforcement. Enforcement proper नहीं है. Some African countries like Libya and Somalia, enforcement is a big question. Terrorist outfits like Boko Haram are proliferating in Africa. तो there is no proper enforcement mechanism. Policies, resolutions वगैरह सब आ जाते हैं, टेबल हो जाते हैं, पास भी हो जाते हैं, बट enforce कैसे करें, implement कैसे करें, that is something which is lacking. Then in the AFPAC region, terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda are on resurgent mode. ठीक है, in 2023, the chief of Al-Qaeda was assassinated or was killed by the foreign forces. That is one such achievement of this global war on terror. But ऐसा सुनने में आया है कि हमजा बिन लादेन, the son of Osama bin Laden, is resurging this particular organization. So let's see what he has for the world. So this is a big challenge. Then blocking by China and UNSC resolutions. तो multiple times क्या होता है कि countries resolution table करती हैं to label individuals or organizations as global terrorist individuals or global terrorist organizations. अब वहां पर क्या होता है कि those resolutions have to be adopted by all permanent members as well as non-permanent members UNSC में. तो 5 permanent है, 10 non-permanent है. तो चाइना हमेशा ब्लॉक कर देता है कि नहीं जी, ये बंदा हमारे हिसाब से टेररिस्ट नहीं है. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल साजिद मीर के लिए हमने टेबल किया था 2022 में. साजिद मीर के लिए चाइना ने बोला कि भाई अभी हमें तो देखना पड़ेगा, सोचना पड़ेगा, अभी फिलहाल हमारे हिसाब से ये नहीं है, बट वी विल हैव टू इन्वेस्टिगेट. तो साजिद मीर को नहीं बनाया गया ग्लोबल टेररिस्ट, क्योंकि यहाँ पे प्रोसीजरल आई वुड से इनएफिशिएंसीज है. सिस्टमिक इनएफिशिएंसीज हैं यूनाइटेड नेशन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल में, क्योंकि हर डिसीजन कंसेंसस से लिया जाता है। जब तक सबकी रजामंदी नहीं होगी तब तक कोई भी इंसान या टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ग्लोबल टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन डिक्लेयर नहीं होगी। तो ये सब सिस्टमिक इनएफिशिएंसीज हैं, ये चैलेंजेस हैं। अब यहां पर भी टेररिज्म की डेफिनेशन का ना होना बहुत खलता है। देयर इज दिस वैक्यूम ड्यू टू दिस, क्योंकि यूनिवर्सल कंसेंसस नहीं है। मतलब कोई ऐसी डेफिनेशन नहीं है टेररिज्म की, कोई भी एक बंदा कह सकता है कि ये हमारे हिसाब से टेररिस्ट नहीं है, हम कहेंगे ये हमारे हिसाब से है। लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल भगत सिंह, हमारे हिसाब से तो वो हीरो है, बट ब्रिटिशर्स ने उसको टेररिस्ट का खिताब दिया हुआ था। तो ये सारी चीजें आपको समझनी जाननी पड़ेंगी। दिस इज द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज, नो यूनिवर्सल कंसेंसस ऑन डेफिनेशन ऑफ टेररिज्म, जिसकी वजह से ये सब चीजें भी होती हैं। इवॉल्विंग थ्रेट्स लाइक क्रिप्टो करेंसीज, ड्रोन्स का यूजेज, तो हमें इनसे एक कदम आगे रहना पड़ेगा। वी नीड टू बी अहेड ऑफ देम, वन स्टेप अहेड ऑफ देम इफ वी नीड टू टैकल देम, एंड दे आर टेकिंग एडवांटेज ऑफ दीज न्यू एज टेक्नोलॉजीज। तो ऐसा हमें देखना पड़ेगा, सोचना पड़ेगा। कंक्लूजन, क्या कर सकते हैं आगे, ये होना चाहिए कंक्लूजन में। सबसे पहले तो बेटर इंटेलिजेंस गैदरिंग एंड शेयरिंग, तो इंटेलिजेंस गैदरिंग और शेयरिंग ये अच्छी हो, ये मजबूत हो। रिड्यूसिंग द पॉलिटिकल एंड सिस्टमिक रोड ब्लॉक्स लाइक वीटो ऑन रेजोल्यूशंस, जैसे कि वो यूनाइटेड नेशन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल में अगर एक ने भी मना कर दिया तो नहीं होगा वो अडॉप्ट, या एक ने ये भी कह दिया कि मेरे को देखना है अभी, आई पुट दिस ऑन होल्ड, तब भी नहीं होगा। तो डिसीजन शुड बी टेकन बाय मेजॉरिटी, सो शुड बी रिप्लेस्ड बाय मेजॉरिटी, दिस decisions by consensus. Capacity building of vulnerable countries along with prevention of radicalization. So vulnerable countries like in Africa, in AFPAC region, small countries and all, their capacity building should be done. जो कि नहीं हुआ है. This has been one of the major drawbacks of organizations like CTET and all. तो ये चीजें होनी चाहिए. Need for adoption of a global counter-terrorism treaty like Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism (CCIT). ये इंडिया ने टेबल किया था 1996 में इन यूनाइटेड नेशंस कि भाई वी नीड अ ग्लोबल ट्रीटी, बट दिस ट्रीटी वाज नॉट अडॉप्टेड। व्हाई? बिकॉज डेफिनेशन नहीं, हु इज अ टेररिस्ट, यहां पे सारी कहानी अटक जाती। सो दिस इज व्हाट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड विद रिस्पेक्ट टू दिस क्वेश्चन, और ये सारी चीजें होनी चाहिए। बिफोर दिस वी नीड डेफिनेशन ऑफ टेररिज्म विद यूनिवर्सल कंसेंसस। ये चीजें हो जाएंगी, कुछ सुधार हो सकता है इन दिस डोमेन। अब आते हैं लास्ट क्वेश्चन पे, दैट इज क्वेश्चन नंबर 4। ये भी 15 मार्क्स का है और 250 वर्ड्स में लिखना। डिस्कस द जियोपॉलिटिकल एंड जियो स्ट्रेटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंस ऑफ Maldives फॉर इंडिया विद अ फोकस ऑन ग्लोबल ट्रेड एंड एनर्जी फ्लोस। क्वाइट एक्सपेक्टेड था क्वेश्चन मॉलडीव्स से, आया भी क्योंकि पिछले साल हमारे विशेष प्रेम हो गया था मॉलडीव्स के साथ। आई होप यू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट विशेष प्रेम मीन्स। ठीक है। Further, also discuss how this relationship affects India's maritime security and regional stability amidst international competition. तो इंडिया का मैरिटाइम सेफ्टी सिक्योरिटी ये कैसे अफेक्ट करेगा हमारे रिलेशंस मॉलडीव्स के साथ, और कंपटीशन वहां पर, बेसिकली कंपटीशन हमारा वहां पर है चाइना के साथ। पाकिस्तान भी है, पाकिस्तान के साथ ऑब्वियसली इकोनॉमिक कंपटीशन तो नहीं है, बट पाकिस्तान रेडिकलाइज कर रहा है, तो ये प्रॉब्लम हो रही है वहां पे। तो अप्रोच इस क्वेश्चन को आंसर करने के लिए, जियोपॉलिटिकल एंड जियोस्ट्रेटेजिक सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ मॉलडीव्स विद रिस्पेक्ट टू एसएलओसीज। एसएलओसीज का मतलब होता है सी लाइन ऑफ कम्युनिकेशंस, इमेजिनरी हाईवेज इन द ओशंस, वो दिखाऊंगा अभी, थ्रू द विसिनिटी ऑफ मॉलडीव्स। कंपटीशन इन मॉलडीव्स विद चाइना एंड पाकिस्तान, तो ये हमें देखना है, इसको नजर रखते हुए हमें इस क्वेश्चन को आंसर करना। तो इसका इंट्रोडक्शन, मॉलडीव्स एक इंपॉर्टेंट कंट्री है इंडिया के लिए, ऑब्वियसली है, क्योंकि इंडिया अपना इन्फ्लुएंस इन द इंडियन ओशन रीजन बढ़ाना चाहती है, और इंडिया की नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी और सागर एक पॉलिसी है, सिक्योरिटी एंड ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल इन द रीजन। ये रीजन जो है, दिस रीजन इज इंडियन ओशन रीजन। मॉलडीव्स दोनों में ही आ रहा है, नेबर है तो नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी का पार्ट है। सागर सिक्योरिटी एंड ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल इन द रीजन, इंडियन ओशन रीजन में है तो सागर का भी पार्ट है। तो ओवरऑल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है हमारे लिए, और हम नहीं चाहते कि चाइना का प्रेजेंस इन मॉलडीव्स रहे ज्यादा एज कंपेयर टू अस। सो वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस। So India's geostrategic footprint in Maldives is very much crucial to secure its maritime trade on one hand and keep China and Pakistan in check on the other hand. Significance, सबसे पहले तो important SLOCs, that is sea lines of communication, इसका full form लिख देता हूं। That is Gulf of Aden, Strait of Hormuz in West Asia and Strait of Malacca in Southeast Asia। ये यहां से पास होती हैं। थोड़ा सा मैप के पे देखते हैं तो हमें ज्यादा आइडिया लग जाएगा। सो बेसिकली ये मॉलडीव्स है, ठीक है, ये माले यहाँ का कैपिटल। तो यहां से वेस्ट एशिया से हमारा ट्रेड आता है, दैट इज बेसिकली एनर्जी ट्रेड बहुत है, ठीक है। अराउंड 80% ऑफ इंडिया एनर्जी ट्रेड कम्स फ्रॉम दिस साइड। तो ये जो ट्रेड रूट्स आप देख रहे हो, ये डॉट 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 से देख रहे हो आप, दीज आर ट्रेड रूट्स, इसको कहते हैं एसएलओसी। अब वेस्टर्न साइड से अगर कोई भी ट्रेड हमारे वेस्टर्न कोस्ट पे आना है तो ठीक है, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। बट इफ वेस्टर्न साइड से ट्रेड हमारे ईस्टर्न कोस्ट पे जाना है तो वो मॉलडीव्स के पास से गुजरेगा। तो हमारे को मॉलडीव्स के साथ अच्छा रिलेशन रखना पड़ेगा, तभी हमारा ट्रेड इनके साथ अच्छा रहेगा, है ना। सो दिस इज हाउ इट इज। तो गल्फ ऑफ एडन आपका इधर हो गया, ये रहा गल्फ ऑफ एडन, ठीक है। स्ट्रेट ऑफ हॉर्मूज ये हो गया आपका, ठीक है। तो यहां से बहुत सारा एनर्जी ट्रेड आता है, इधर से सारा ट्रेड यूरोप जाता है, ये रहा स्वेज कनाल आपका, ठीक है। चाइना का ये स्ट्रिंग ऑफ पर्ल्स है जो इंडिया को घेरे हुआ है, मोतियों की माला, इसको भी काउंटर करने के लिए मॉलडीव्स के साथ जरूरी है हमारा अच्छा रिलेशन होना। तो ये इसका इंपॉर्टेंस है, जियो स्ट्रेटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंस। 50% ऑफ इंडिया एक्सटर्नल ट्रेड एंड 80% ऑफ एनर्जी इंपोर्ट्स आर फ्रॉम वेस्टवर्ड एसएलओसीज। वेस्टवर्ड एसएलओसीज मतलब वेस्ट से जो आ रही थी, जो मैंने अभी दिखाई। सिक्योरिटी ऑफ इंडियन ओशन रीजन इज वाइटल फ्रॉम मॉलडीव्स पर्सपेक्टिव। फिर काउंटरिंग चाइना, चाइना को काउंटर करना मॉलडीव्स में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। चाइना स्ट्रिंग ऑफ पर्ल्स, स्ट्रिंग ऑफ पर्ल्स मतलब मोतियों की माला, मोती यहां पर मतलब पोर्ट प्रेजेंस, पोर्ट पे आपका प्रेजेंट है, प्रेजेंस है। तो चाइना ने इतना स्ट्रैटेजिकली वो प्रेजेंस अपना बना रखा है कि इंडिया को घेर रखा है। क्यों घेरा है? क्योंकि इनको ये लगता है, चाइना को ये लगता है कि उसका ना जो ऑयल ट्रेड है, जो एनर्जी ट्रेड है, चाइना का भी यहां से आता है, इधर से वेस्ट एशिया से, इधर से। और ये जो देख रहे हो आप, ये सब चाइना का ऑयल शिपिंग लेन्स है, ये पास करती हैं स्ट्रेट ऑफ मलक्का से, है ना। ये वर्ल्ड का बिजिएस्ट ट्रेड रूट है। तो चाइना को लगता है कि इंडिया जो है ना, ये अंडमान एंड निकोबार आइलैंड पे प्रेजेंट है और ये कभी भी यहां से चाइना का ट्रेड ब्लॉक कर सकती है। तो अगर इंडिया ने करा तो चाइना भी इंडिया का कर देगी, इसलिए पहले से ही चाइना तैयार होकर बैठा है ऐसे। तो ये चीज समझने वाली है, ठीक है। रेडिकलाइजेशन बाय आईएसआईएस एंड इंक्रीजिंग पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ पाकिस्तान यूजिंग मॉलडीव्स एज अ टेरर लॉन्च पैड। तो पाकिस्तान आजकल क्या कर रहा है, बहुत ज्यादा रेडिकलाइजेशन में लगा हुआ है मॉलडीव्स में। इस्लामिक कंट्री है मॉलडीव्स, तो रेडिकलाइजेशन इज ऑल्सो इजी। एंड अब इसमें क्या है कि यहां से टेररिस्ट भी लॉन्च कर सकता है इंडिया में। तो ये हमको देखना पड़ेगा। दैट इज वाई वी नीड टू बी विजिलेंट ओवर हियर। इंटरनेशनल कंपटीशन, हमारे को चाइना के साथ इकोनॉमिक कंपटीशन और स्ट्रेटेजिक कंपटीशन है। वहां पे चाइना का प्रेजेंस वहां पे माले पोर्ट पे है, मराव पोर्ट हो गया, सॉरी मराव पोर्ट पे है, और फेडू फिनोलू करके एक आइलैंड है वहां पे, वो चाइना डेवलप कर रहा है। ये टूरिज्म हब है वहां का, ठीक है। मराव पोर्ट पे वो प्रेजेंट है। अब इंडिया ने जो काउंटर किया है, इंडिया ने भी काउंटर किया है। हालांकि वहां पर एक कैंपेन चला अभी, इंडिया आउट कैंपेन, और वहां पर इंडिया का प्रेजेंस या चाइना का प्रेजेंस विल ऑलवेज बी डिपेंडेंट अपॉन द पॉलिटिकल पार्टी ओवर देयर, कौन सी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी है पावर में, ठीक है। तो बट फिर भी इंडिया के जो प्रेजेंस है वहां पे, जैसे ग्रेट माले कनेक्टिविटी प्रोजेक्ट, इंडिया बहुत सारे आइलैंड्स को जोड़ रहा है, ब्रिज बना रहा है। इंडिया फंडेड प्रोजेक्ट ऑफ वाटर एंड सीवरेज नेटवर्क इन 28 आइलैंड्स ऑफ मॉलडीव्स, तो अभी एस जयशंकर जी गए थे, उन्होंने ये वहां पर इग्नोग्रेट वगैरह भी किया। अडू डिटोर लिंक ब्रिज प्रोजेक्ट, अडू रिक्लेमेशन एंड शोर प्रोटेक्शन प्रोजेक्ट। तो ये सब प्रोजेक्ट्स इंडिया भी कर रही है वहां पे, ताकि हम चाइना को कंपटीशन दे सके, ठीक है वहां पर। तो ये चीज बेसिकली हमें समझने वाली है इस पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन में। और इसका जो कंक्लूजन है, इंडिया को सस्टेनेबल प्रेजेंस अपना मेंटेन रखना है मॉलडीव्स में। ऐसा नहीं कि बहुत ज्यादा आप घुस रहे हो, क्योंकि पिछले 5 साल में, यानी कि 2018 से लेकर 2023 तक हमारा बहुत ज्यादा प्रेजेंस हो गया था वहां पे। हमने अपने ट्रूप्स वहां पे डाल रखे थे, हेलीकॉप्टर्स वहां पे स्टेशन कर रखे थे, फाइटर जेट्स वगैरह, हेलीकॉप्टर, बहुत सारी चीजें कर रखी थी। तो तभी तो वो इंडिया आउट कैंपेन सक्सेसफुल हो गया और एंटी इंडिया गवर्नमेंट केम टू पावर ओवर दैट। वी नीड टू बी वेरी मच कॉशियस एंड सस्टेनेबल। कुछ ऐसा सा करे कि कोई भी गवर्नमेंट आए, कोई भी गवर्नमेंट जाए, टाइज हमारे बरकरार रहे, आर टाइज रिमेन्स इंटैक्ट। इसको कहते हैं परमानेंट कोऑपरेशन। लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, आई एम टेलिंग यू दैट मल्टीपल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स, माले कनेक्टिविटी प्रोजेक्ट जो बन रहा है, ग्रेट माले कनेक्टिविटी प्रोजेक्ट, दैट इज एन एग्जांपल ऑफ परमानेंट कोऑपरेशन। ये होना चाहिए, इस टाइप से एंगेजमेंट रहना चाहिए। विच एवर गवर्नमेंट कम्स, विच एवर गवर्नमेंट गोज, द रिलेशंस आर नॉट इंपैक्टेड एज सच। इंडिया ऑल्सो नीड्स टू लुक फॉर पार्टनर्स इन द इंडियन ओशन रीजन। आफ्टर ऑल क्या वजह है मॉलडीव्स के साथ रिलेशंस निभाने की? अच्छा, एक तो नेबर है, प्लस इंडियन ओशन में हमारा स्ट्रेटेजिक प्रेजेंस है। बाई चांस यहां नहीं हो पा रहा है या कुछ चैलेंजेस आ रहे हैं इन द मोमेंट, तो आप दूसरी कंट्रीज जो इस रीजन में, जैसे कि मॉरिशस है, उनके साथ रखो ना बढ़िया, ताकि आपका प्रेजेंस बरकरार रहे इन द इंडियन ओशन रीजन। दिस इज व्हाट यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड। तभी मैंने बोला कि मॉरिशस के साथ हमें भी रखना चाहिए, और भी कंट्रीज इन द इंडियन ओशन रीजन टू सिक्योर इट्स इंटरेस्ट। हमको, वी शुड नॉट पुट ऑल आर एग्स इन वन बास्केट, डाइवर्सिफिकेशन इज द की। So then only we will be ahead in the competition in the entire region, that is the Indian Ocean region, ठीक है। सो ये बेसिकली खत्म हो गया है चारों क्वेश्चंस आई हैव डेल्ट विद। गुनगुन, गुनगुन का क्या डाउट है? विजय कुमार यादव, प्लीज टॉक टू द मैनेजमेंट, आई कैन नॉट डू दिस, प्लीज रिपीट। सर छुट्टी, प्लीज छुट्टी हो गई है गुनगुन, यू कैन गो, द क्लास इज ओवर फ्रॉम माई साइड, ठीक है। So I hope you guys understood how to approach these questions. आपके आंसर्स में डाइवर्सिटी होनी चाहिए, आपके आंसर्स में बैलेंस होना चाहिए, एक तरफा नहीं होने चाहिए। आपके आंसर्स में फ्रेशनेस होनी चाहिए, बिल्कुल रीसेंट टाइम से आप एग्जांपल्स लाके डालो। और कोई रॉकेट साइंस नहीं है रे आंसर राइटिंग। यू नीड टू बी वेरी सिंपल, because the examiner wants to read what the question is demanding, and examiner wants to read simple things. You have to make the life of the examiner very easy. हाँ, इजी सबसे तो तब होगी जब आप कुछ मत लिख के आओ, छोड़ दो, क्वेश्चन ही आंसर ही मत लिखो। बट इतनी इजी भी नहीं करनी है, यू डोंट हैव टू डू दैट मच इजी। Means whatever you are writing in a simplified manner. You are answering the question exactly what is asked. That is it in a very simplified way. Okay. So that is it from my end. I am ending this session. I hope you guys understood it pretty well. I'll meet you for future sessions, and till then, you guys keep studying, keep reading, keep writing answers. Most importantly, keep revising. Then only you will be able to produce good content. Okay. Namaste. Jai Hind.